Now, I'm going to ask any member, I'll start with Senator Adabo, if they want to make any opening remarks, and if any others want to, just acknowledge and I'll recognize you, okay?
Sure.
Senator Adabo.
Thank you, Chair Bonacic, and I want to thank you and your staff for this timely hearing. I want to thank my staff, Chris Higgins, as well, for preparing us for this hearing. I want to thank you all for being here today, which I think is a very timely hearing for our state. You know, as we keep an eye on the federal government and what it does, I do believe timing is good in the sense that a 1993 Bradley Act is about time to be reevaluated. And so much has happened since 1993 in terms of technology, both in the home and personal, and ways to not only increase entertainment throughout the state, but certainly revenue and jobs, but also to protect the integrity of our sports throughout the state. So I do look forward to the testimony, and I do believe our state should go forward in a cautious manner, but certainly move forward in looking at this issue. So again, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Senator Marshall.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for being here. Thank the chairman for scheduling this public hearing. It's a very interesting topic that I'm going to be gaining a great deal of information on today. So for me, it's very important to be here. I don't want to give an opinion until I have opportunity, of course, to listen, but I do have some concerns relative to how this affects racinos and casinos and who gets to play and who doesn't, and those are very important issues to me. So I'm looking forward to listening to the testimony.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Boyle.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate and thank Chairman Bonacic for holding this very timely hearing. So many times in state government we're reactive to things that are going on, and we need to have a quick hearing and get some information. Well, as the Supreme Court case is going on, we're getting information beforehand, and depending on how it comes down, we'll be ready in New York State. So thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay. Senator Comrie.
Yes, I want to thank Chair Bonacic and Senator Adabo for putting this hearing together. I believe that this is a good proactive opportunity to air these issues. I want to also note that New York arguably has the strongest and most robust fantasy sports law in the nation. I hope that we will be guided by that endeavor. Should we get into a position to authorize sports betting, of particular concern to me, ensuring that we are providing good consumer protections, ensuring that any state-generated revenue is earmarked and locked into those initiatives that we are guaranteed. Everything that we've been hearing about putting money towards different initiatives, we want to make sure that that can happen and be guaranteed. And we also want to make sure that for consumers that we are ensuring nice ringtone. We are ensuring that the consumers are protected, that with the proliferation of handheld devices, that we ensure that young people there's a way to monitor to make sure that young people are not wasting their educational hours online gaming, and that there's opportunities for MWBEs to take part in any economic development projects that would accompany the proliferation of sports betting. I look forward to the testimony of the committee, and thank you again, Chairman Adabo and Chairman Bonacic and Senator Adabo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me. It's important to note this is not an official Assembly Senate hearing, but the Senator and I work very closely together, and rather than redo this, he was gracious enough to invite me to attend this hearing with him. I look forward to the testimony that I know that we're going to receive. And New York has been in the forefront of regulation in gaming. Fantasy sports, the regulation that we put through will become a national model. And I think based on what we hear today, we will still remain in the forefront of legislation as it pertains to this important issue. So in anticipation of a favorable outcome from the Supreme Court sometime in the next couple of months, we should commence with the hearing, Senator.
Right. Thank you. I'd like to call the first witness. It's Dan Spillane, Senior Vice President and Assistant General Counsel with the National Basketball Association. And while Mr. Spillane is taking a seat, I'd like to give a shout out to Andrew Witchell, who's behind me, who works very hard on these issues and helped arrange this public hearing. So, Mr. Spillane, we're all yours.
Thank you, and good morning to Chairman Bonacic and members of the committee, Chairman Pretlow. My name is Dan Spillane. I'm Senior Vice President and Assistant General Counsel for the National Basketball Association. And I appreciate the opportunity to share the NBA's views on how sports betting should be addressed in the state of New York. While the NBA's business is global, New York has been our headquarters since the league was formed in 1946, and 2 of our teams are based in the state, along with 1 team in the WNBA and 2 in the NBA G League. Our long-standing presence in New York, along with the state's national reputation as a policy leader, makes this a particularly suitable forum for us to discuss this important issue. The NBA's position on sports betting has evolved in recent years. For decades, the NBA, along with other major professional sports leagues, opposed the expansion of legal sports betting. The leagues were instrumental to the passage in 1992 of a federal law, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, sometimes called PASPA, that prevented the spread of state-authorized sports betting beyond Nevada and a handful of other states. Despite that federal prohibition, illegal sports betting remains widespread in the United States. It's impossible to measure the amount of illegal betting with any precision, but many experts estimate that illegal betting in the U.S. is in the range of $100 to $200 billion per year, and some think that number is even higher. These bets are taken in a black market that does not support local businesses, that cannot be taxed, and most important from our perspective, cannot be monitored and cannot be regulated. At the same time, legal non-sports gambling has become more popular and accepted. Most states offer lotteries. There are hundreds of legal casinos and racetracks across the country, and legal regulated online gambling is still in its early stages, but is growing. Creating a legal framework for sports betting is not a novel proposition. Nevada has a small but long-standing legal and regulated sports betting market. Sports betting also is popular and regulated in many other parts of the world, such as Europe and Australia, in which the NBA has done business for years. In England, a sports fan can place a legal bet on a smartphone, at a stadium kiosk, or even on a television. There are extensive regulations in place in these jurisdictions to protect the integrity of sports and the consumers who are placing bets. We've studied these issues at length. Our conclusion is that the time has come for a different approach that gives sports fans a safe and legal way to wager on sporting events while protecting the integrity of the underlying competitions. There are different ways to implement legal sports betting. One approach, which we would prefer, is for Congress to adopt a federal framework that would allow New York and other states to authorize betting on sports subject to strict regulatory requirements and technological safeguards. We believe a federal approach is the simplest way to create clear and uniform protections for the integrity of our games. But as we're all aware, the U.S. Supreme Court is currently in the process of deciding a case that could narrow or invalidate PASPA, and states like New York and others have reacted by moving forward to discuss and advance new laws that could immediately thereafter permit legal sports betting. We can't sit on the sidelines while that activity is occurring. New York, of course, is further along than many other states. In 2013, this legislature passed a law that would allow the state's 4 casinos to offer sports betting to customers on their premises immediately if the Supreme Court were to invalidate PASPA. But that 2013 law does not include safeguards that are necessary to protect our fans and the integrity of our sport. So for these reasons, we support the passage of a comprehensive sports betting bill that would serve as a model for a 50-state solution, whether that happens in Congress or on a state-by-state basis. That legislation should, at a minimum, include 5 key components. First, it should enable the detection and prevention of improper conduct relating to sports betting. Among other things, this would include mandatory alerts by gaming operators of unusual betting activity, centralization of betting data to facilitate monitoring of bets across operators and jurisdictions, eligibility requirements to prevent insiders from placing bets on their sports, and enhanced criminal prohibitions to prevent betting-related corruption. Second, the legislation should recognize that sports leagues provide the foundation for sports betting while bearing the risks that sports betting imposes even when it's regulated. Without our games and without our fans, there could be no sports betting. And if sports betting becomes legal in New York and in other states, sports leagues will need to invest more in compliance and enforcement, including bet monitoring, investigations, and education, to compensate leagues for the risk and the expense created by betting and the commercial value that our product creates for betting operators. We believe it's reasonable for operators to pay each league 1% of the total amount bet on its games. This approach draws from how sports betting is legally regulated in some other jurisdictions internationally, like Australia and France. Third, leagues should have the right to restrict wagering on their own events. Certain types of bets are more susceptible to manipulation than others, such as whether a player will commit the first foul of a game. Different sports will have different types of bets, and so each league needs the ability to approve the types of wagering that are offered. Fourth, sports betting legislation should include consumer protection requirements, and these would include a rigorous licensing program to ensure that operators are properly vetted, age restrictions, self-exclusion programs, and other measures to address problem gambling, and regulations of gambling advertising to protect vulnerable persons. These also would include the use of official league data by gaming operators to ensure the accuracy and consistency of betting outcomes. Finally, the law should authorize betting on internet and mobile platforms. If betting were limited to the 4 land-based casinos that are located miles from New York City or other major population centers in the state, then many consumers likely would continue to bet illegally through offshore websites and other illegal channels. Each of these protections is critical. The NBA's first and paramount responsibility is to protect the integrity of professional basketball and preserve public confidence in the league and our sport. So we urge the legislature to act as soon as possible to amend the existing law and create a robust regulatory structure that includes the protections that we've outlined today. The NBA looks forward to continuing this discussion, and I thank you again for the opportunity to share our views.
Thank you, Mr. Spillane. Let me ask you this. You talked about the 5-step comprehensive approach if sports betting were implemented in the state of New York. Can you talk about what steps you do now to protect the integrity of your game from corrupt players or referees or officials, if you would, that would be helpful, what you're doing now,
Absolutely. So we do a variety of things already. One is that we have very strict rules relating to betting, prohibiting betting on our games by insiders, athletes, officials, other personnel, coaches, and the like, with the strongest penalties that we could possibly impose, essentially a lifetime ban from being involved in the sport. Also rules relating to manipulation of games and the disclosure of confidential league or team information to people who are going to use that for betting purposes. All of these are our most serious rules and carry with it the strongest penalty of a lifetime ban. We educate our personnel, again, players, officials, others, on these rules to make sure that people not only understand the rules and the consequences, but also to give practical tips on how to avoid issues and protect yourself in situations where people involved in illegal gambling may be looking for inside information, looking for an edge. We try to give our people the tools they need to be able to proactively avoid being in compromising situations. We also monitor bet activity on our games in jurisdictions where it can be monitored, where it's legal and where there's a market that can be detected. We work with outside organizations that are expert in that area to provide intelligence on betting markets and also to give us alerts of any activity that we should be keeping an eye on and that provides any issues for follow-up. We do other things in this area too, but the notion here is that we want to do more and we will have to do more if betting becomes legal in the U.S. because there's very little that we can actually monitor right now. There's Nevada and that's basically it. Everything else is largely invisible to us that's happening in the United States right now. And in a world where we have legal sports betting in a number of states across the country, whatever number it works out to be, we're happy to be able to monitor that and be able to take more steps to enforce and protect integrity, but it's going to cost us money. We're going to have to do a lot more in that area.
Okay. I think this is a hard question. I don't know if you can answer it. Can you talk about the frequency, the degree of frequency of corrupt actions now in your business, or is it minimal? I mean, you've talked about the 5 steps if sports betting gets implemented. I'm just trying to get a sense of the percentage of frequent acts that are corrupt now within your basketball league. If you can comment, I don't know if you can. I know it's a hard question. And then my follow-up question would be, if sports betting is implemented, and we then implement the 5 steps, which were very enlightening, by the way, would that take care of what you're struggling with now with corrupt actions to what frequency?
So I would say in the area of manipulation of games, I have no reason to believe that we have an issue in that area, both in terms of what we learn from our monitoring of betting markets and other things that we do to monitor activity on our games. In areas involving betting by insiders or disclosure of information outside, over the years there have been occasional issues that we've followed up on in those areas, but it's infrequent and tends to be something that is relatively minor. The one that I'm sure you're aware of that was less minor is that we had an issue with an official back in 2007, and that received a lot of attention, and there's a public report on the investigation that was done on that matter. But since then, no.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Spillane. Any members have any questions? Senator Dabo.
Mr. Spillane, thank you very much for your time here today. A question. You know, as we go into this uncharted territory for our state, we like to look at how, I guess, interactions are with Nevada in the sense that Nevada has the sports betting at this point. What is the NBA's interaction with Nevada's gaming authority? Is it on a regular basis? Is it very intricate as far as very on contact, or, again, very involved with their operations as far as sports betting is concerned?
I would say 2 things on that. One is that we have contact with them. They know where to reach us if situations arise, and fortunately situations have not arisen. And we also have a presence in Nevada and working with, again, one of the businesses I mentioned for monitoring betting activity to give us an ear to the ground on what's going on in the Nevada market. The Nevada regulatory structure is obviously one that's been around for a long time, is fairly well developed and has a lot of good things in it, but it doesn't include a lot of the important things that I described. The sports leagues were not involved in the formation of Nevada's betting infrastructure, and I think there's a lot to commend it, but also some things that now that the leagues are engaging on this and focusing on this, areas that could really be of added benefit from an integrity standpoint, and that's a discussion that we plan to have as well.
So while we may categorize your interaction with Nevada as regularly checking in and being in contact with them, you were not involved when they were setting up their structure, obviously, back then. So therefore, your 5 points, namely the second point and the third point, second point being, second component being to pay each league 1%, and then the third point being leagues should have the right to restrict wagering. Neither of those are in the Nevada structure for the NBA.
That is correct. I believe there may be some limited abilities for leagues to restrict wagering on games that are taking place in Nevada, but beyond that, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Spillane, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to go to Senator Tedesco, who happened to be a great college basketball player. Senator Tedesco.
Dan, you should know that's when I was tall. Been here 36 years, and they whittle you down when you're here. But first of all, let me thank you for being here. Your great work with the NBA, the entertainment they provide. My first question is, what are we going to do about the Knicks? How do we get them back on track? We've got to start winning for us here. But in all seriousness, for some of us here, this question about legal sports betting is not only a question of if we should do it, but doing it right if we do it. And for some of us, like myself, who represents the 49th Senatorial District, one of the largest districts in the state, 4,000 square miles, bigger than Rhode Island and Delaware. But part of it is Schenectady, part of it is Saratoga. I go into rural areas in Hamilton, Herkimer County, and Fulton County. But you should know that the second most famous person in the city of Schenectady is Thomas Edison. He developed a light bulb, helped develop General Electric. The first most famous person is Pat Riley. You may know him. We named the gym after him in Schenectady, and he comes back and visits every once in a while. Had the opportunity to work with him in some sports programs and clinics. Our concern is we have venues in areas in some of our districts, other sporting venues. We just opened a Rivers Casino in the city of Schenectady. We have one of the most beautiful, I hope you've been there, I invite you to come there, beautiful racetracks, not only in New York, not only in this nation, but in the world, Saratoga Thoroughbred Racetrack. We have a racino and harness racing out there in Saratoga. So we're especially concerned on how they're going to fit in to this whole process, probably, because that's going to be a question if we open up sports betting, because you've heard the term saturation, and we want to keep the venues alive that we have. And this is an economic issue as well as an entertainment issue for individuals. But the question I have relates to one of the points you made here about if we do this, I'm going through your points, some of the betting might be more manipulative than other types of betting. Can you just give me one example of what that concern would be for the NBA in terms of being more manipulative of a betting type of opportunity as it relates to the NBA? When I played, if they bet I'd get more assists than shots, they'd lose a lot of money because, I like to shoot. And I know they like to shoot in the NBA, but they play some good defense too. But what would be a more manipulative type of betting?
Sure. Well, I'll give one example from overseas and then talk about the NBA. So one bet that got some attention in the last year or so was a bet on whether a particular player in a European Football League would eat a sandwich at a certain point in the game. Obviously, it has no bearing on the actual outcome of the game, the score, or anything like that, but it got a bunch of attention. He did it. And then there were disciplinary proceedings and investigations and things like that ensued. I know it seems just sort of like a silly example, but the fact is, this actually created integrity issues by having this bet type that was something that was just completely separated from and easy to manipulate relative to the game. In our sport, and I think this could be said for any sport, the concern is higher with bets that involve individual players and where poor performance or acting in a way that is separate from your overall performance in the game is going to determine the outcome of a bet. So one example I gave is whether a player is going to commit the first foul of the game, which is something that wouldn't affect necessarily how the game turns out, wouldn't necessarily make a player look like they were not playing as hard as they could in the game. And something that might be more open to manipulation. I'm not saying necessarily that's something that should just flat out not be allowed. There are other ways you can deal with that. Maybe it's the bet amount is lower on certain bets like that, or there are other protections that need to be put in place. But those are the types of things I think that all leagues would need to look at when the betting market opens and also becomes more sophisticated over time. It's not just going to be over-unders. It's not just going to be point spreads, but you're going to have a lot of other in-game proposition type bets.
You have the potential of getting some deep water with that type of thing, because the first three-point shot, the first technical foul, you could get into a lot of areas where those would be suggested as being manipulative bets. And I guess there's a potential there, if you talk about that may become illegal, some of those types of things, in terms of, it's illegal to bet on sports right now except for Las Vegas. So there's still going to be a venue for some of that illegality in the areas you're talking about.
I'm glad you raised that, because one thing that we're sensitive to and how we're thinking about this is wanting to make sure that that legal operators can compete with the illegal operators. And so you don't want to be unnecessarily and overly restricting what operators can do. If these bets are going to be available on illegal markets and popular there, then maybe there's a case to be made for trying to do it the right way in a legal market. So I think what I'd want to be taken away from this is I don't have a list of particular bets today that I would say these should just flat out not be allowed. I think it's an area, though, where there's more scrutiny that should be put on them, and leagues should have a say in how it turns out.
Thank you.
Senator Boyle.
Thank you, Dan, for your testimony. And it would seem to me that any problems there might have been in the 50s and maybe 60s with professional athletes, when they were not making the money they are now, the contracts, they wouldn't risk a career for doing something shady. I just want to touch base real quickly on the revenue side. You said that hundreds of billions of dollars potentially in black market sports betting now. In a state we're looking at a $4 billion deficit this year, and the tax revenue for New York State would be astronomical, certainly in the many millions of dollars if we're able to legalize it. I know you looked at national numbers. Did you have you any state-by-state potential numbers or in terms of the black market, or is it all complete conjecture?
The estimates of illegal betting that I'm aware of are on a national basis, and there's a very wide range. There's one that's as high as 400 billion, which I think is not viewed as the most credible, and others on a national basis are 100, 200, some numbers in between. All of it is, of course, speculative because the illegal market, by its nature, is difficult or impossible to measure. But those are the best numbers that exist. Whether those studies have drilled down on a state-by-state basis, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that. And as far as projections of what this amount would be in a legal market, and whether that has been done on a state-by-state basis, I'm not sure of either, but could look at that. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, thank you very much, Mrs. Spillane, and thank you for what you do to help with the economic vitality of the state of New York. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Our next witness will be a panel discussion. Chris Kay, who is the CEO and president of New York Racing Association. Joseph Applebaum, the president of New York Thoroughbred Horsemen Association. And Jeffrey Canenzo, executive director of the New York Thoroughbred Breeders. So, gentlemen, come on up, have a seat. And we'll let you decide the order on who wants to speak, and
all right,
we'll continue.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
And panel. Thank you for inviting me here today. I am Chris Kay, the Chief Executive Officer and President of the New York Racing Association. The New York Racing Association conducts thoroughbred racing at Aqueduct Racetrack, Belmont Park, and the Saratoga Race Course. In preparation for today's hearing, I have read the briefs filed by all the parties in the case of Christie versus NCAA, the case involving sports wagering. The dispute arises out of the 1992 federal statute that bans sports wagering across the country, except in those states that already had regulatory oversight in place. In fact, 4 states at that time had such regulatory involvement that sports wagering was permitted to continue, and 1 state, New Jersey, was given the opportunity to implement additional regulations to come within the new federal statute. In other words, state regulatory involvement is important and critical under the statute. To that point about the importance of state regulation, New Jersey passed a law in 2012 that permitted sportsbook wagering at racetracks and casinos, the same gaming institutions that New Jersey had regulated for decades. The law vested the state with the same comprehensive regulatory abilities it already was using to regulate the existing wagering activities conducted at racetracks and casinos, and ensured that no such further activity with sportsbook wagering would occur unless it was properly licensed and regulated by the state. Now, New Jersey's 2012 2012 law was struck down by a federal appellate court on the grounds that it conflicted with and was superseded by the 1992 federal statute. In its opinion, the federal court stated that although the federal law prohibits the issuance of licenses for sportsbook wagering, New Jersey was not precluded from banning, in whole or in part, prohibitions on sports wagering. So New Jersey took that language and did precisely that. In 2014, its statute banned the prohibition of sports wagering to the extent it applied to racetracks and casinos. By so doing, New Jersey argues, it complied with the federal decision and still can offer sportsbook wagering activity to its citizens, limited to those sites that it currently regulates. Now, New Jersey's opponents in the case argued that the 2014 statute is simply wordsmithing and achieves the desired effect of the 2012 law that was previously struck down. But what cannot be in dispute is the fact that under both the 2012 and 2014 law, the activity of sportsbook wagering is limited to racetracks and casinos, institutions that New Jersey has comprehensively regulated for many decades. Similarly, the state of New York has comprehensively regulated wagering at racetracks, including NYS racetracks, for many decades, and has now just recently developed similar regulatory oversight for the casinos authorized by the 2013 statute. The same reasons why it is in the public's best interest that horse racing facilities be permitted to operate a sportsbook wagering operation in New Jersey apply equally here in New York, where our state has demonstrated its skill in comprehensive regulatory oversight of our racetracks and our wagering activities. The case raises complex questions about federalism and the application of the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Supreme Court decisions are normally written very narrowly, meaning their decisions try to address a very specific issue involving a very specific application of a very specific statute in question. If the Supreme Court permits New Jersey to offer sportsbook wagering, it is imperative that everyone fully understands the legislative language and intent, as well as the legal principles within the New Jersey law that are the determining and defining factors in the Supreme Court's decision. But equally important is how sportsbook wagering would actually work after the Supreme Court's decision. Regarding how it would actually work here in New York, we make three observations. First, this activity must be heavily regulated, and the state of New York has a track record of extensive regulation at NYS racetracks, regulation that is working well. New Jersey currently regulates racetracks and casinos and would now extend that regulation to include sports wagering. The same logic justifying that regulatory extension to racetracks in New Jersey also applies to our racetracks here in New York. Second, NYRA has a successful history serving the needs of many New Yorkers that want to wager on the sport of horse racing. And we should now be allowed to extend that service to other sports. We have cultivated strong, long-term relationships with our loyal customer base because of the quality of our service that we provide. To preclude racetracks like ours from being able to offer sportsbook wagering would disrupt long-standing relationships that developed over many years and decrease consumer choice. We do not see why this service should be limited simply to casinos, which were only recently created and regulated. Some of these casinos have only been open a year or two. By contrast, this year we will be celebrating our 150th running of the Belmont Stakes, and you are all invited to come. Third, Permitting NYRA the opportunity to compete with the casinos would be a big benefit to all New Yorkers. Some of our locations are actually geographically much closer to where New Yorkers live and work than some of the casinos, and therefore more convenient. In addition, permitting us to offer this service will spur greater competition to provide the best possible service to our residents. And finally, our residents should have the right to choose between racetracks and casinos or other organizations that you may contemplate. And the right to choose is always a good thing for the people of New York. In conclusion, should the state decide to pursue sports wagering after the Supreme Court's opinion has been rendered, we would note that first, state regulation is critically important. The state has a track record of extensive regulation at NYRA racetracks, and it should be extended into this additional area of sports betting. Second, NYRA has a successful history serving a large number of New Yorkers that wager on sports. Please, do not disrupt or destroy those important relationships. And third, please, permit NYRA the opportunity to compete with the casinos to provide better service, more convenient locations, and greater choice to the public. 3 good reasons to add NYRA to the list of organizations that would offer sportsbook wagering in New York if or when it becomes legal to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to allow or ask that all the speakers finish their testimony, and then we'll have questions from the panel. And my only suggestion would be for the other 2 speakers, try not to say the same thing that Chris said. Okay? Okay. So who's ever up next, let's hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's always a concern when we all get together. Senators, Assemblymen, good to see everyone. I'm here to speak on behalf of the New York Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association. We're an association of over 5,000 owners and trainers of horses here in New York that run at the NYRA facilities. I'd like to also say I'm proud that our industry sits here together with Chris and Jeff, and we can deliver a message that's consistent. Thoroughbred racing has a long history here in New York. We're the second largest agribusiness in the state, and our owners and trainers employ thousands of workers in Queens County, in Nassau County, in Saratoga County. And we have, our business has been known to generate over $4 billion in economic activity to every single county in the state, all 62. And I think that's important to understand from where we've been. More to the point of today's hearing, the pari-mutuel system has served New York State for over 75 years. I believe it was 77 years ago that we left behind this somewhat archaic bookmaker system and transferred over to the pari-mutuel system. It's generated hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue in that time. And basically my message is our industry knows something about sports wagering. It's not new to us. We've been doing it quite a long time. I'm here today to support the inclusion of the current bet-taking outlets, be it NYRA, the OTBs, the racinos, and participants in whatever system we come up with over the next few years. As we await the Supreme Court's decision, there's great anticipation of the riches that are going to be unlocked, whether it's tax revenue or revenue to bet-taking outlets. I hope we can use our history here in New York to inform both the law and the regulatory process. We've been doing this for over a century, and we think we have some good things to say. Existing wagering outlets should be included simply because it's the best way for New York to ensure a widely available, well-regulated system that serves the needs and interests of our residents. More specifically, there's some advantages. I want to heed the chairman's message and say, we've been well-regulated, we're audited, we're known by the government by the regulators and by our customers. We're not new entities. Okay? We do have these business relationships with each other that are long-standing and rock solid. Okay? The current system has integrity. It has ways of following up on that, and that's understood both here and with gaming and by our customers. In a more positive light, I'd like to say New York has a unique generational opportunity. Okay? This won't come around too often again, and we can develop a best-in-class wagering system if we take our time, do things right, and learn from what's gone on, both here and around the country. I believe New York should adopt a wagering architecture that includes technological flexibility and innovations, such as online access, possibly exchange wagering, maybe in-game wagering. This is what's going on around the world, and quite frankly, will be going on around the rest of the country. There will be forward-thinking gaming states that will adopt more progressive legislation, and it will leave behind some states that are not on the cutting edge. An ideal platform for New York would include a few of the following: the ability to handle unlimited amounts of wagering dollars, the availability within New York as well as the rest of the country. We should not restrict ourselves. Access to a complete array of wagering technology, a widespread network of bricks and mortar as well as online access. Don't limit our customers' choices, in other words. And we need something that is the confidence of both customers, regulators, and all the business partners. A system like this actually already exists and functions in New York today. Right? It's anchored by NYRA, and it's participated in by racinos and OTBs all over the state, and it has customers all over the state. Surely, the state government has been approached by bookmakers promising riches, respectability, and a quick start. I know they're out there. And similar windfalls have been promised before. But I think we need to think about things and think about what some of the bookmaking system means. Pools will not be deep. It may limit the scope of economic activity more than we believe. Arbitrary betting limits will be imposed as they are in Las Vegas or England or wherever. Service to customers will suffer. It's a non-competitive, monopolistic environment. You must be served by one outlet. And finally, customers will flee. In the internet age, dollars can move across borders very quickly, and there's little we can do to stop it. To conclude, I'd like to humbly offer a few suggestions. Be deliberate. I think many providers will be in a rush to get a system up and going, but I think we have a lot of learning to do and think through what the best system is for New York State. There's no first mover advantage in this business, meaning if New Jersey and Pennsylvania do it, we don't have to jump right in. It'll be fine. It's better to develop the better mousetrap. The money flows to where the best system is. And thirdly, I'd like to say we have a unique opportunity. New York's one of the only states with enough size and wealth to have our own system. Most of the smaller states that are looking to be very aggressive in this matter are going to need liquidity from other sources if they want to have a system that actually produces tax revenue or actually produces notable profits for the providers. So we're in a unique situation that very few states are going to benefit from, and I hope we take advantage of that. To conclude, the Thoroughbred Horsemen in New York strongly support extending sports wagering to the existing bet-taking system with its well-known history, integrity, and participants. My thousands of members thank you for this opportunity to address you, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Applebaum. Jeff?
I can make this very easy and just say ditto to...
Thank you, Jeff.
My two... and I will do that on several fronts in the essence of time here, but thank you, Chairman, and the rest of the Senate, and Senator Pretlow for allowing us all to be here, and this is very, very nice of us to have a unified front and carry the same message from our industry to you. I'd be negligent not to point out that you have a great photo behind you of a New York bred that happened to win the Kentucky Derby funny side. The only New York bred to do that, but it's nice to see that here. I think my message is very, it's the same message you just heard, so I'm not going to repeat the points about technology, the platforms, the regulatory perspective of what our industry has provided here for many, many decades. What I will point out is a few areas that I think we should consider and be cognizant of as you make decisions going forward. Our industry is the employment arm for gaming and racing. And we are the people that make up a great, great sport here that has a significant economic effect across our state. We did a study in 2012 where the figures that we've used over and over came out. I can tell you that there's a study that's been done nationally that has been broken out in New York State that we're going to be able to provide you updated figures a month from now in February on as well. So we'll be able to show how our sport has grown here and over the last several years. But we affect every single county in the state of New York. And that's very important because there's not many industries that actually can say that. And when you're considering ways of introducing new competition to the gambling dollar in the state of New York, I think we need to be very cautious of how it affects other gambling dollars here in New York State. And a year ago, I sat in the same seat. We talked about a situation that affected our industry where we weren't at the table and didn't have a play in what was going on gambling-wise, and that was related to Genting's Casino and Nassau OTB. And here we are today, still feeling the burden of what's been placed on us from that situation, such that we've lost millions and millions of dollars in the last year. To give you an exact figure, the breeding industry's lost almost $2 million, and the horsemen and purses have lost over $4.5 million. So everything we talked about a year ago is still in play today, and we're still suffering from a situation where we were not included. So I think my message to you is our industry needs to be a part of whatever solutions going forward out of the state. We have the platforms, we have regulatory bodies that support us, and we simply want to have a seat at the table going forward as you move with this situation. I think that you'll find that, again, our industry is the employment arm for gaming. And we can talk about the hundreds and a few thousands of jobs that come out of the commercial casinos that have been instituted in the last year. Well, there's 33,000 jobs that are affected by the people that are sitting right here at this table across 62 different counties. So again, employment, economic dollars come out of horse racing. It's important to the state, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Would there be any interest in fixed odds sport betting as opposed to pari-mutuel betting? Because you talked about pari-mutuel betting.
Yes, sir. And to that end...
To the horse racing industry, I'm talking specifically. Then I'll ask the question as to other sports of which the racetrack is where the bets would occur.
So I can't comment on the level of interest, if any, there would be to change the kind of wagering system we have with pari-mutuel wagering and horse racing. I can only say that when we began the process of selecting an IT platform for our NYRA bets, we looked around the world to get the very best system we could find for pari-mutuel wagering. But we also looked with the idea of finding a system that would work in the event there was sportsbook wagering and fixed odds. And as a consequence, we selected Global Betting Exchange, an organization out of Ireland that provides the very kind of sportsbook wagering you mentioned earlier in Australia. It also provides exchange wagering, as its name implies, in the UK. So we did that with the idea that in the event there was the opportunity to offer fixed odds, we would have the technology to be able to do so.
And that would be to all the other sports other than
Yes, sir.
Horse racing?
Yes,
okay. So you would hire your own professionals to do that and implement it? I mean, in other words, you're going to take a model that experts use for whether it's pari-mutuel betting or fixed odds sports betting for other than racetracks.
Correct.
And you think you would have the capability, or you'd be willing to undertake that capability to get in the game, to do those things?
Yes, we would be willing to undertake those opportunities, provided the regulatory climate permits us to do so.
Okay. The next question is, would you have the financial resources to weather the significant swings in fixed odds sports betting? I'm going to give you an example. Nevada sports books lost a total of over $11 million on the World Series this past year in fixed odds sports betting. Could you, in the racetrack business, have those financial reserves to survive in those betting swings financially?
Right.
That's a question that I addressed to you.
And I think, again, part of it is going to be dependent upon the kind of regulatory framework in which we work. So in any business, you say, for example, if this is the kind of scope of wagering we can have, knowing the risk associated with it, then this is the kind of reserves you have. So, for example, you mentioned a moment ago the $11 million or whatever a loss could be.
It's 11.4,
Yeah. Well, they also were making money before that. So you have this actuarial type analysis that says, here's how much we project we're going to make, and here's how much we project we're going to lose. We have the reserves to be able to handle those losses. It's the same kind of thing, frankly, we do right now at NYRA in a little bit different context. And when we put our budget together, we know we're going to have some days where we're going to be wiped out. We're going to have rain. We're going to lose our revenue on those days. Does that mean we have a budget that says, oh, we're going to have perfect weather every day? No, it doesn't. So we would look very carefully to see the kind of regulatory environment that you construct, and then we would operate within it, just as we have with pari-mutuel wagering.
You think the racetracks have the resources to check on cheating or collusion in all other sports other than racetracks?
We do certain things right now to check on cheating, to check on money laundering and the like. It's very extensive. Excuse me. The other thing I would say to you is that this is going to be a collaborative effort. In the briefs filed by the state of New Jersey, they talk about the fact that when the 2012 and 2014 legislation was passed, it also had a very robust aspect of it on regulation that would be conducted by the state. So this would be the kind of situation in which I would foresee us being partners, so to speak, that there would be regulatory activity by the state and regulatory activity by NYRA.
Okay. You have any questions? Anybody have any questions of these gentlemen? Anybody?
I do. Just
Senator Marshall.
First, I would just like to congratulate Mr. Applebaum on his recent appointment. Congratulations to you. It's a huge commitment on your part, and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Yeah,
It's very proud to represent our people.
I'm glad to have you. It's wonderful. Also, just one question, probably for Chris. Have you looked to see, I mean, this is coming, but how much you've been reviewing it, I don't know that. But have you looked to see if not included, what would that mean to you financially?
No, we have not.
Okay.
We've taken all steps to try to prepare for that day. And part of what would happen is how would this operate would help us answer that question if we were not included. However, I would go along with what Jeff said, that there's only so much wagering activity that goes on, and for us not to be included, we believe would hurt us. But the amount of that pain, I don't know.
I'm not sure we know yet in New York how all the gaming that we're already doing with the new casinos that really aren't even totally up and running yet, how we're doing relative to all of that.
Right.
Thank you.
Senator Phillips.
Yeah. I too would like to thank you for your presentation. I want to echo something that all three of you said. It's about the hardworking people that work at the track. And these are people that have families that provide tremendous input to our local economies and to the state of New York. So we thank you for bringing it up. I think we'd all be remiss not to say thank you to all, I think you mentioned 33,000 people that are affiliated with the track. I know when I have the opportunity to tour the track, I am extremely impressed. So thank you. I guess a question for Chris is what percentage of betting for the track is online versus physical going
It can
in?
be anywhere from 88 to 91% is going to be online.
So
or off track.
Right.
You know, which is why it was so important that NYRA Bets be created, and I want to thank the state of New York for permitting us that opportunity to start in 2016 in that endeavor.
So 88 to 91% online.
That's the amount of wagering that's done off track,
Right.
which can be done at other tracks or done online.
So it's probably reasonable to assume that if sports betting is allowed in New York State, that it really is going to be an online type.
Right. And so, for example, the online activity comes through what's known as Advanced Deposit Wagering Organizations, or ADWs, which are, for the most part, the amount of the activity is monitored in the state of Oregon. And I'll give you rough numbers. 1.1 billion through Twin Spires, 1 billion through TVG, and between ourselves and Stronach Group's ExpressBet, another $1 billion. So those are the four largest that contribute over $3 billion in online wagering through those ADWs.
Right.
Yeah, and I believe it's about 70% of the nation's pari-mutuel wagering occurs online. And another important part about NYRA's platform is that it's a national platform. You're talking about clientele nationally that exists, that's betting on sport, that there absolutely is crossover between future sports wagering and the sport that we hold in terms of wagering, pari-mutually based and whatnot. So
we operate in 29 states.
Okay. We're joined by Senator Sanders there on the end. Senator, thank you for being here. Chris, do you have a sense of the amount of illegal betting going on in New York on horse racing?
I do not.
Okay. You know, another question in my mind, and I don't think you gentlemen would know that, but I'll ask some of the pros when they start coming in. Mr. Spillane from the Basketball Association said maybe sports betting illegally in the country could be 100 to 200 billion, and could be more.
Right.
And my thinking is if the state of New York is a gem target for population and money, what percentage of that gambling market we could capture in the state of New York? And I know it's a speculative number, but I keep thinking about that number.
I think
it's always moving.
Right. I don't know the number, but I think it would be huge. As Mr. Applebaum said earlier, we do have some of the jewels the rest of the country would love to have, not only in terms of our sports team, but also our population and our relative wealth vis-a-vis other states.
Right.
We can drive this, and that's why I look forward, first off, working with these gentlemen and our organizations. It's been a pleasure working on this and other things we're working on together, and to collaborate with you to make sure that we create something that will stand the test of time and benefit New Yorkers.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We appreciate both you three gentlemen for being here testifying today. Okay?
Thank you, Senator.
Our next witness will be two gentlemen. Andrew Cunningham, who's the Director of Integrity Services for Sports Radar, and Tom Russell, who's General Counsel for Genius Sports. Okay? Gentlemen, welcome. It's up to you. Whoever can start, whoever wants to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cunningham is first. Okay.
Firstly, many thanks to Chairman Bonacic and the committee for having me here today. I'm going to expand a bit on what I submitted in my written testimony, already with some key points I think are relevant today as well. I've worked in the field of sports betting integrity for the last 14 years, assisting over 60 sports regulators, operators and law enforcement agencies around the world. And a key part of my experience has been in developing and implementing processes and systems to detect suspicious betting. For the last 4 years, that experience has been gained at Sport Radar. Sport Radar, with offices in 30 locations around the world, is a leading provider of technologically advanced sports data products to media and betting industries, as well as, in my role, the leading provider of integrity services to sports regulators, law enforcement agencies and governments globally. Our bet monitoring, investigation, education services are used by over 70 sports federations globally, including here in the US, the NBA, the NHL and the MLS, and globally organisations such as FIFA, the world governing bodies of cricket, ice hockey and rugby, to name but a few. And we've also assisted various law enforcement agencies around the world on this important topic in providing evidence and carrying out investigations, as well as regulators of betting around the world, for example in Norway, Italy and Australia. And our approach and expertise and capabilities have proven effective in assisting our partners. To date, we have detected and reported to our partners over 3,500 sporting fixtures as likely manipulated, and our findings have led to over 230 individuals being prosecuted and sanctioned in either criminal courts or in sporting disciplinary proceedings. And on 4 occasions, our evidence has been examined at the Court of Arbitration for Sport and stood up to scrutiny there. In terms of bet monitoring, what I'm here to talk about in much more detail today, we have a bespoke, technologically advanced and award-winning system called our fraud detection system. Betting data is fed into the system on over 200,000 sporting events a year in real time. The system tracks betting patterns at over 550 global betting operators. That includes all relevant betting operators in markets from around the world that can be tracked and traced, whether that be Asia, Europe, Australia, South America, for example. If it can technically be tracked and traced, we pull it into our system and monitor those odds to detect suspicious betting patterns. And we operate a sophisticated 2-tier alerting system to identify any unusual betting patterns. And once an alert is generated, we then have the qualitative analysis, which is important, of our experts to analyse those betting patterns and decide if something is suspicious, which we then report to our partners and help them with the investigation. So the technology and expertise in today's age very much exist to monitor betting patterns and detect if suspicious activity is occurring. And as we've heard today, a reason that is sometimes put forward not to regulate sports betting in a jurisdiction is that it will encourage match fixing. From Sport Radar's experience and my own professional experience, we believe the opposite is very much true. And within a robust framework operating, as opposed to letting the legal or black market thrive, this has clear integrity benefits. The UK is a good example of this, where robust regulation is believed to mean that no relevant black market exists. There's believed to be a 95% channeling rate, which essentially is the market share that licensed operators enjoy in the UK, so a very small illegal market. And there are strong integrity measures in place in the UK as well. For example, there's a sports betting intelligence unit collating suspicious betting reports from licensed operators and then actioning those in conjunction with leagues and law enforcement. In terms of strong integrity measures globally, Italy and France are also seen as exhibiting good practice in that they have a transactional level monitoring system at regulator level, collating all bets from licensed operators for integrity purposes. Australia, where I've worked most recently for the last 4 years up until I relocated to New York in November, is also seen as a shining light in the integrity world, particularly in the powers that it gives to sports federations and leagues. And we heard some of this earlier from Mr. Spillane of the NBA. For example, Australian sports get to choose the bet types which are allowed to be offered on their events in dialogue with the licensed industry to understand the risks and base that on evidence. For example, and it was alluded to earlier, if a bet type is only offered on the regulated market, obviously banning it is not going to drive it to a legal black market. And there are some bet types and examples in Australia where bet types were banned that were only offered on the regulated industry by sports. The licensed operators there also can ban a competition from being bet on. For example, there's one sport we work closely with there who decided that they didn't want their youth competition to be offered on the regulated market, and again, they checked whether there was an offshore market for that competition, and there wasn't. And also, the sports have a very strong ability to dictate the level of reporting they get from licensed betting operators on integrity. So this includes, for example, the ability to check if their participants, referees, players, coaches have wagering accounts and are wagering breaching their rules. And obviously this adds integrity benefits as well, because if there is suspicious betting, the operators have to provide who placed those bets, which is important from an investigatory perspective to be able to make links between potentially people fixing the events and the people placing the bets. As we've already heard today, studies and figures quoted commonly in relation to the size of the legal market in the US range from 50 to up to 400 billion. Nobody knows for sure, but it is massive. And its existence negatively affects the visibility and audit trails that are important to police the integrity of betting markets. So getting the sporting and betting regulatory setup right from the integrity point of view is important in order to cover the key areas of integrity that need to be covered, whether that's preventing the fixing of whole matches, preventing the fixing of parts of matches, preventing the misuse of inside information, and also preventing the breaching of betting rules by participants. All these need to be considered and guarded against. And of course, education is crucial of all participants involved. So bringing as much of the illegal betting occurring in the US as possible under the sophisticated technology that can exist in a robust framework to monitor and detect if there's suspicious betting is crucial. Looking again to Australia, due to the proactiveness of sports, law enforcement and betting operators working together there, it is believed that match fixers have actually been deterred from trying to fix Australian sporting events. For example, there have been sporting and criminal sanctions handed to tennis and soccer players in recent years, which sent a strong message to match fixers that if you try and fix events in Australia, the setup here will catch you and you'll be prosecuted. And having a robustly regulated sports betting market with the right level and sophistication of integrity measures was crucial in allowing this to happen. Sport Radar is committed to assisting and educating relevant stakeholders in the US to help formulate sports betting regulation from our expertise around the world. And we advocate that this should include, from a bet monitoring perspective, my area of expertise, a solution that is centrally collating and analysing bets in real time at a transactional level, also cross-referencing this with the global betting markets. If bets are being placed on a US event overseas that are deemed suspicious, it's important that systems are joined up and know this. And the technology exists to do this. Such solutions should identify and report suspicious betting in real time to the regulators and the leagues. Now, where that system sits is there's different models around the world. It can sit with the regulator itself. It can sit with the league. In whichever scenario, both those bodies should have access to that data in real time and be able to implement the procedures they have when a suspicious betting alert is generated. And whatever model exists, the framework must allow and encourage the cooperation between all those key stakeholders, the operators, the sports, the regulators, and law enforcement where that's needed. That concludes my testimony, and I thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Mr. Russell.
Yeah, hi, and also I'd like to say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Sure.
I agree this is a very timely moment to be discussing sports betting regulation in the state of New York.
You have to speak a little louder into the mic, please. Thank you. Thank you.
I was just saying thank you for
The little red light would be on if you press the button.
Very good. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you
So I'm just saying thank you for the opportunity. It's a very timely moment to be having this discussion around sports betting in the state of New York. My name is Tom Russell. I've been an attorney in the sports and betting industry for over 10 years, and I'm currently the General Counsel for Genius Sports. Genius Sports is a global leader in sports technology and data services. We specialise in providing customers with software for the collection, distribution and protection of official sports data. We partner with sports to help protect their competitions from the threat of match fixing and betting related corruption. Some of the largest leagues and federations in the world work with us. We provide technology, education and consultancy services to help them safeguard the integrity of their events. Those include Major League Baseball, PGA Tour and the English Premier League as well. I think it would be useful, just before just to write the top what I'm about to say, is to make sure we're all absolutely clear on what we're talking about here and what we mean by match fixing and what we mean by integrity and why integrity is so important. Match fixing is a definition that surprisingly has
sort of different views on what it actually means. But in my view, it means betting-related corruption, which is the manipulation of events by participants in a sport to ensure a specific outcome in a particular game or event. And this can be anything from manipulating the final score, the winning margin, or individual decisions from officials. And it's done to gain a competitive advantage or a financial gain. So why does integrity and the integrity of the game matter? It's always a question that doesn't need to be asked, really. I mean, but the global popularity of sport is entirely dependent on one factor, and that is integrity, in my view. The transparency and fairness of competitions underpins sport's universal appeal, and threats to the integrity of sport cause irreparable harm to both public confidence and the game itself and any fan engagement. With regard to our integrity services and how we help protect integrity, I mean, our service is not fundamentally different to the one offered by Sports Radar, but at Genius Sports we use our sophisticated technology to monitor real-time odds movements against our mathematical algorithms to work out where there are anomalies. We then carry out intelligence gathering and analysis of those anomalies to work out what's gone on. In most cases it may be an innocent cause, a sporting reason or injured player or some other reason, but in some cases there may be something more nefarious going on. And in those events, we will look to report that to our partner sport. We also provide education. We work with training with players and coaches and officials to help them understand why match fixing needs to be prevented. We provide audit and consultancy services, and obviously, as I've just mentioned, we provide reporting to sports as well.
Integrity monitoring.
I mean, our position gives us quite a unique insight at the sort of crossroads between sport and betting to give a view, I think, on both why regulation of sports betting is a positive thing and also what that regulation might look like, bear in mind the experience we've had in Europe and Great Britain. The reason why legalisation of sports betting benefits sports integrity, in my view, is it provides visibility and it provides control of the activity of sports betting. It allows sports regulators to include specific regulations to protect sports integrity. And in Great Britain, there are a number of key provisions that help to combat match fixing through regulator actions. These include that all licensed sportsbooks are obliged, as part of their licence conditions, to report potentially suspicious betting activity to the national regulator, the Gambling Commission. Sportsbooks also have information sharing agreements with sports themselves. And in the event of an investigation, sports are required to share personal information with customers. And all information is reviewed by the Sports Betting Intelligence Unit, which I think Andy mentioned earlier. Just another point I'd like to make is our experience has given us the view that there's one key measure the regulators could take to improve sports integrity or the protection of sports integrity, and we suggest that is the use of official sports data, which is actually sanctioned by the sport itself, is made mandatory. So what I mean by that is that you can only actually engage in sports betting, you can only offer sports betting on a sport if you're taking the data from the sport itself. And what that does is create a sort of virtuous closed loop, which means that all activity can be monitored very closely by the sport, who can be rewarded that through financial returns, and also means the regulator has a very clear view. So just to summarise on that, the benefits of the regulator are that it can ensure that all of the key sports, so the NBA and the other sports who are engaged, those as well, are engaged with the state's licensing process. It means that the regulatory body can provide a legally compliant and sustainable mechanism that will enable sports leagues to benefit financially from the regulation of online sports betting. I mean, we saw in Indiana there was a suggestion of a 1% integrity fee. I mean, we would see that more in terms of a payment to sports in return for use of their data, which would again be a mandatory licence condition to be able to offer sports betting. The benefits for the leagues are clear. It means that they know who's betting on their sport, because there would be a requirement of the licence that you had to report all the betting activity if you're an operator, so sports know all of the betting activity which is taking place. And as Mr. Spillane said earlier, that's something that they don't know currently. And it also means that they can impose contractual obligations on operators, so they can actually set the type of betting that goes on their sport. Basically, put sports at the centre of sports betting. And in my view, any successful regulatory model has to have sport at the centre, because unless the sports are buying into it, it's going to be very difficult for it to do anything which has the correct integrity. But it also benefits the operators themselves, because only those operators that have the licence and have the right to use the official data will have access to the fastest and accurate and most reliable product, because sports will control how data is collected on their sports and will make sure that only those operators who have the correct probity and actually sit at the regulated table will have access to this product. And of course, what that does do is mean that the illegal market is marginalised. And we touched on earlier, some other speakers today, about the size of the illegal market in the US. And one thing that any regulatory model is going to have to do to be successful is to beat that illegal market. And we see by providing access to official data only to those licensed operators who pay their taxes, who pay the sport, it means that the illegal market will be marginalised. And it also benefits consumers as well. Consumers need trust in any sports betting market. They need to know that who they're betting with is a proper person, and that and if you have the sports sanctioning this activity, some of the most trusted brands in the US are the sports leagues, then that will obviously improve consumer confidence as well. That's the end of my testimony. Welcome to take any questions you may have.
Gentlemen, I've called this public hearing to learn and listen, and both of you have so much more advanced knowledge that you shared with us that it's a lot to comprehend.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask some basic questions. You're in the integrity monitor business. 10 years for you. You indicated 4 years in Australia. Do you sense do you rely more on technology, or do you rely more on number of people in trying to get a handle on corruption in sports betting? And I'm not sure if it's an intelligent question.
No, I mean, it's a good question.
And you know, cutting edge technology is always changing and becoming more sophisticated, and I assume more helpful. But I'm trying to get a sense as we get into this. Is it technology-based? I know we need people, but what do you find from your experiences with respect to that?
It's very much both. Technology is important and evolving. For example, we're now looking at using machine learning and AI technology to help us monitor betting patterns and detect suspicious activity even further. But whatever the system spits out or the output generates, you still need that qualitative analysis, that human element of experts that understand and look at, who understand the sport and look at each betting pattern to ultimately decide if something's suspicious. So you need both. The technology, of course, is crucial.
Yeah, sure,
and you know, we process over 5 billion data sets a day in our system. So we need the technology to filter that and then flag what, you know, you need the analyst, the human element to come in and look at and ultimately decide if something's suspicious. So they're both, in our experience, crucial to what we do.
I think it's worth saying some context here as well. The environment that both Andy and I are working in is a online digital sports betting environment in the majority. I mean, most sports betting in Europe and the UK is online, it's digital. And also, the most popular form of sports betting is in play, so in running. It's while the game's going on. So these bets are happening fast, okay?
Yeah,
and
sure.
you need the technology to keep up with that. But I absolutely reiterate what Andy said. It is a combination of both. It's the mathematical algorithms that plan how we think the market activity is going to go, but measured against the activity itself. But that's not enough on its own. You also need people to understand why that's happening, and whether there are sporting reasons why odds might have spiked and why they haven't. So it's very much a combination of the two. I agree with that.
The other thing that I've been thinking about as you're talking, you have experience with all the professional sports globally. And I know that once this gets started, we need government legislation. But once the government legislation is implemented, where sports betting is a go, from your experience, is it more through regulation and a gaming association that does integrity monitoring? Or do you keep coming back to the government for more legislation, just generally?
I could speak to Great Britain. I mean, the governing legislation in Great Britain is an act called the Gambling Act 2005. Everything starts there. I mean, that's effectively a framework act that sets out, it's outcome-based, it sets out principles. Underneath that, quite rightly, you've identified as secondary legislation, which is managed by the Gambling Commission, which is the national regulatory body, which is mandated by the central government to impose licence conditions on operators. So actually the vital regulation that operators day to day have to comply with are the licence conditions codes of practice, which is secondary legislation, and which are always updated and are being updated again in April 2018. And so it's the primary legislation sets out the framework, but yes, the secondary legislation sets out the meat on the bones, if you like.
Would you have a sense of the amount of illegal betting going on in the world or in the United States? Would you have any sense?
Well, I'd echo the numbers that Mr. Spillane said earlier. I mean, those are familiar to me, if not they're higher. I mean, the point about all of this, of course, is we don't know, because there's no regulation, and without regulation, you can't see it, and that's what regulation is so important, because it brings visibility and it brings control.
Okay. What country would you say has the best system for integrity monitoring, from your experiences?
I would go, I've worked in the UK for an operator, running an integrity team. I've worked in Australia and also in Europe. I think it's a difficult question to pick one, but certainly the Australian model, I think, in terms of the interaction between sports and betting operators is a shining light. But again, in the UK that happens. The UK has that central intelligence unit that's collating all reports wherever they come from, licensed operators in the UK. Australia doesn't have a sports betting intelligence unit at a national regulator level, for example, but Australia does allow the sports to dictate the bet types, whereas the UK doesn't. So I think the UK and Australia, as I touched on in my testimony, as well as then something that we're advocating, looking at France and Italy, where they have a central collation of bets as they're happening from operators. The UK and Australia doesn't have that, whereas France and Italy do. So I think if I had to pick, I'd pick facets of each would be my answer. So to overcomplicate.
You sounded like a diplomat hitting 5 countries, so I try to pin you down for one. Yeah. You seem to indicate Great Britain and Australia would be the substantive ones, as I understand you. Would that be a fair statement?
With something that they're lacking that France and Italy have as well.
Are you talking about the food, or are you?
Well, what I just add to that?
Senator Phillips?
So, thank you. I have a couple questions. Are your two firms competitors?
In some aspects, yes.
Okay, just so I understand the dynamics, and I will tell you, I echo what the senator said, that the amount of information was extremely helpful. So Mr. Cunningham, one, welcome to New York. You're going to lose that Australian accent pretty soon and get a good New York accent. You mentioned that your firm works for, I think, the NBA, the
NHL and MLS on integrity.
So does that mean, so I understand, so are those regulatory bodies within those sports organizations?
No, so
or what do you do for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So those sports, obviously, in the absence, or there's a bigger legal market in the US, but they are proactive in recognizing that there's a global betting market on their sports. On an average NBA game, there could be over 300 bookmakers in our system offering odds from around the world. They recognise there's a betting going on not just in the US but globally, and that needs to be monitored, and that's what we do for those bodies. Our system monitors for every fixture the global betting market, and if there's any anomalies, we would report that to them.
And I assume Mr. Russell's similar for...
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of interest in US sports internationally, so US sports have to be aware of activities taking place outside the US.
Outside. And Mr. Russell, you mentioned that it's really important to use the sports' own data. Why wouldn't a regulatory body use the sports' own data?
That's a good question. I mean, but I think that the opportunity for the US is that it's starting from a blank page, right? We have nothing today, and I think that's why this is such a great opportunity for state regulators to look at this. I think that why different countries haven't developed in that way are probably for a multitude of reasons. But I think why this is such an exciting opportunity for the United States is because of the way that sports operates in the United States. There are 4 major leagues, and that's what people bet on. And though each of those leagues controls the totality of the sport they control. Whereas in Europe, when you look at soccer, there's lots of different stakeholders. You have UEFA, you have FIFA, you have the Premier League, you have the FA Cup in the UK. Lots of different stakeholders. When it comes to American football in the US, there's one. It's the NFL. I should just call it football, sorry, it's not American football here. Or when it's basketball, it's the NBA. When it's baseball, it's MLB. You get the point. So it means that the sports can very much wrap their arms around the entire operation. So it's almost, if you wanted to create a sports market that was built for integrity monitoring, it probably would be the US. And that's why it's such an opportunity. If regulators can require it as a condition of a license from an operator, they can only engage in sports betting if they take the data from the sport and pay a fair return for that sport and report on all activity that they're betting on that sport. You do, as I said earlier, create this virtuous loop.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Boyle.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your great insights. I just wanted to touch base real quick. You mentioned about the possibility of using artificial intelligence for technology moving forward. It's a fascinating idea. But one of the things that struck me was mentioned that they bet on things like what part of a match a player's going to eat a sandwich. We think of shaving points and things like that as integrity. But so in the country, in England or in Australia, do they have such a wide range of what is called sports integrity that it would actually cover something like that, which we didn't think about?
So that example happened in the UK where the sports don't have the power, if that's the word, to dictate the bet types. In Australia, that wouldn't have happened because betting operators have to have an agreement with the sport before they can offer bets. That agreement includes a commercial aspect, and that's not my area of expertise, but it includes a commercial aspect of return to the sports. But importantly, from integrity, it includes integrity measures and an agreement on what bet types can be offered. And if they want to offer new bet types, they have to apply or talk to the sport before they can do that. So in that example in Australia, that would have been highly unlikely to occur. And as I alluded to earlier, some sports in Australia have banned certain bet types from betting where they believe, as Mr. Spillane alluded to earlier, are too easy for an individual to easily influence. And there's been a few examples of that in Australia as well.
But I think on bet types as well, I mean, when we're talking about having to squash the illegal market quickly in any regulated model, I mean, the danger, of course, with limiting bet types is it just pushes customer away onto the legal markets. I mean, it's a balancing act, I think, when it comes to managing bet types.
Senator Buddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you very much for not only your time and testimony today, but the work you do in protecting the integrity of sports. I think right in addition to protecting our consumers and consumer protection with sports betting, sports integrity is a major issue, so thank you very much. And as you were giving your testimony, I was thinking about later on today, they will announce the Hall of Fame inductees. And yet, probably, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens don't make it because of those who want to protect the integrity of the sport, and P. Rose will probably never make it. So there is a major issue about sports integrity nationally, and so going forward, we're definitely going to make this an issue. In the business that you're in, and you've been there for a number of years, betting-related corruption, have you seen any trends or something that may be just on the cusp of happening that may be more prevalent as years go on? So are there any trends in terms of corruption or something down the horizon that you may see coming up?
From our experience, I think I touched on earlier, we detected and reported to our partners over 3,500 events as likely fixed since 2008. The vast majority of those, the bets were placed with operators licensed in jurisdictions with low regulatory standards in terms of integrity reporting. I think that would be fair to say as a trend that we've seen, but that continues. And match fixers know this as well, and they're attracted to obviously where they can bet, where they're less likely to be detected, of course.
And that's a really interesting point, because one trend that you have seen in regulation is more and more countries are starting to set up their own licensing regimes. There's definitely been a shift in the last 10 years for countries putting in place local licensing regimes, which creates less of an opportunity for operators based in jurisdictions where regulatory standards aren't so high to sell into those jurisdictions. And the fact is that regulation is good for integrity, it's good for sports integrity, because it shines a light on the activity that's taking place.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Marcio.
I'm just trying to understand the technical process of how this happens. You're the company who cares about the integrity of what's going on. Does your software integrate with software to actually have online sports betting? Are you is that software yours? How does, in countries that you're currently operating, does the country establish the rules and then bid out a company who would run this for them? How's it working where you have experience?
Do you mean, do we own the software that carries out the monitoring?
Yeah, not just the monitoring. Do you integrate with other software that actually carries out the sports betting?
Yeah, I mean,
that's what you are. You're an integrated process with another company who actually runs the sports betting.
There are two sides to the business, one of which is sports betting software and one of which is the integrity monitoring. The integrity monitoring is completely ring-fenced, but of course you can't have an integrity service unless you have a relationship with the sports betting markets. You have to have that sharing of information. I mean, there's no way that, I mean, the integrity business is totally ring-fenced, but a company such as ours and Sport Radar, we form a bridge between the two markets, because you can't have an integrity service in isolation, because you have to understand the activity that's taking place on the betting market.
We couldn't have such an advanced monitoring system if we didn't have a large part of our business who'd serviced the bookmaking industry for years and built products for them. Without that, you can't have the advanced integrity monitoring. You need that data and that technology.
And how is that all integrated with the governments that do they set the legislation and then just bid out your services? And then, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to get a handle on how technically involved is New York State once we allow, if we do allow sports betting.
There have been some governmental bodies around the world who have issued a tender for an integrity services provider. We want a system that will monitor horse racing. For example, this has happened in a state in Australia where there was a tender where parties such as ourselves were able to bid if we wanted to be that provider. There were certain criteria that the monitoring provider had to meet in the submission, and ultimately they made a decision on the criteria that they'd set on which provider they would use, if that answers your question. And similarly, when a sporting body decides to use services, integrity services, that they may have their own tender process, if you like, and then take a decision on who they want to work with.
I think you need to think of us as sophisticated tools that are used by the stakeholders. So we're used by sports as a tool to understand what's going on in their sports, and the same way used as government as a tool to understand what's happening, basically.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Senator asked most of my questions. I also want to know, just trying to figure out, do we buy your proprietary software? If we were to do this and if we were to engage your firms or one of your firms, both or whatever, or different firms, how would we go about it? Would you have software to sell us, or what would you do?
Yeah, essentially, we have a suite of services of integrity that we sell, essentially, and one of them is bet monitoring. So we would provide a service outlining what we have. We're going to monitor the regulated betting market here in the state of New York. This is what we will do, and there will be a fee associated with that, if that was what you were asking you.
In an ideal world, I think the way that I would see it working best in any newly regulated model is that it would be the sports that manage their own integrity, so it would be the sport that uses us as a tool to understand the activity on their sport, and then they use that to then report to the regulatory body. But it differs in state by state, but that to me is the optimum model for how our services should be used.
The panel before you spoke of one person advocated that we stay with, I call it an in-house model, where we do everything, and I'm hearing that you're suggesting the same, that it's not bid out, if you wish, or, well, certainly would be maybe bid out, but you wouldn't have a lot of points of gambling. You would have 1 point, or...
It makes sense from an integrity perspective and coordination and compliance to have one central system that would feed all bets being placed under a state's jurisdiction into one system. That has benefits from an integrity perspective, to be able to look across everything and then cross-reference that with global data if wanted. But if that's what you're asking, absolutely. I think having one system that sees everything has integrity advantages.
The absolute optimum model is to have a centralised hub which is then basically has clear visibility of everything, and that is then used to audit and provide integrity services, and then sports and regulators would feed into that.
Playing with this, my last question, so playing with this for another moment, and how New York could capture the nation's market perhaps, or beyond. So a New York system would somehow be imagine if we wanted to be national, or for that matter international, how would a New York-based system or a system for New York State capture the market through the rest of this nation or perhaps the world?
Well, I think the challenges there obviously depend on how the regulation develops and the outcome of the Supreme Court case and what happens to PASPA, etc. But I think there are obviously challenges in the US of cross-border gambling services, because we're talking about the internet here. So I think what we're envisaging currently, which may be right, may be wrong, is that there will be some sort of state-by-state solution following a relaxation of PASPA, which means that each state would have its own regulatory model, which would include, on our suggestion, some sort of centralised hub. And then you would have a sort of intra-state online gambling system is I think the common thought of how this might develop. So how New York State would then sort of extrapolate its own system out into other states, I think that would be challenging, bearing in mind how we think it's going to develop. But obviously if there was a more federal solution, then absolutely, if the state had a market-leading technology solution, there's no reason why it couldn't then use that on a wider basis.
And on a state-by-state model, I think that's where uniform standards, if possible, that in an ideal world each state could agree to around integrity, who are looking to regulate sports betting, would help. Otherwise you could end up with a disjointed matrix of one state doing that, others not, and obviously if it was the leagues who ended up collating information from the regulated industry in each state, they could potentially put it into one system, but that depends on every state having that in their legislation and regulation. So it's a complex.
It would be, Mr. Chair, if we were to do this, I would really suggest, thank you, gentlemen, I would suggest that whatever system we come up with is flexible enough that we look to the nation. And if we can have them part of the New York State Empire system, that might be interesting. They come to us rather than we try to just tap this market, go for it all.
That would be our dream and goal. Gentlemen, are either of you affiliated with any public traded companies, either on the foreign exchange or on our stock exchange? Are you individual gentlemen? So if sports betting were allowed in the United States, you wouldn't be thinking of going public and starting an IPO, would you?
No.
That was a joke. That was a joke. But both gentlemen were excellent. You were very informative. You were very helpful. And, we'll have to go and read your testimony and start digesting it more to appreciate all the wonderful knowledge you shared with us today.
And any follow-up questions will always be welcome to our post after this event. Happy to help with.
Absolutely, same from us.
Yeah, we thank you both, gentlemen. Thank you. Our next witness is from Nevada, and his name is Joe Asher, who's the CEO of William Hill U.S. Thank you very much, Mr. Asher, for being here and for your patience, really.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, sure.
Great, thank you. Chairman Bonacic and members of the committee, my name is Joe Asher, and I am the CEO of William Hill's U.S. business, and very much appreciate the invitation to appear here today. In a moment, I'll give you some background about our business. However, the central theme of my testimony is to ask you to allow that the legal sports betting market in New York, when it comes, and hopefully soon, be permitted and allowed to compete with the thriving black market, which won't easily or quickly go away. Taxes and regulation will be critical to that effort. William Hill is one of the leading sports betting companies in the world. It's been in business for about 85 years. The company is headquartered in London and publicly traded on the London Stock Exchange. with a market capitalization of about $3.5 billion. William Hill holds gaming licenses in the United Kingdom, Gibraltar, Australia, Italy, Spain, the United States, and the Bahamas, and employs about 16,000 people around the world. William Hill's U.S. business, which I oversee, is headquartered in Las Vegas. I took the red-eye last night to get here to see you today. I got a chance to get over to the Renaissance and get a quick shower and put on a suit. In Nevada, we operate 108 sports books, and they're located within casinos. And that represents more than half the sports books in the state. And not just in Las Vegas. When people think of Nevada, they think of Las Vegas, but Reno, Carson City, and the many small towns in between. I used to live in New York, and it'd be like thinking that all of New York was New York City, when there's much more to this state. We're also the market leader in Nevada as measured by sports betting revenue in the state. Our market share is about 30% in a disaggregated market. We employ about 450 people in Nevada. In addition to retail sports books, where you physically go into a casino, William Hill operates Nevada's leading mobile sports betting app. Customers must initially sign up for an account in person at a licensed casino. After establishing their account, customers may place bets from anywhere within the state. Fueled by television coverage and the internet, the popularity of sports betting has never been higher. In Nevada, around $5 billion was wagered on sports last year. Nevada's sports betting business provides somewhere around 2,000 jobs, stimulates hundreds of millions of dollars in other economic activity, and helps bring more than 30 million visitors to Nevada each year. And I wanted to touch, this isn't in my prepared remarks, but the gentleman earlier were speaking about looking to all these other countries around the world, and I think it is instructive, but really the place I'd start is Nevada, where the legal sports betting market has existed for decades. And in fact, just earlier this week, we had regulators from New Jersey visiting our office, and they've been out to Nevada to meet with the gaming regulators, to meet with the other casino operators within the state. And the Nevada model works. It works very, very well. And so I'd encourage folks who are interested to come out to our great state. And Las Vegas is a nice time, particularly this time of year. Elsewhere, William Hill is the exclusive risk manager for the state of Delaware's sports lottery, where parlay wagering on NFL football is permitted. And while the product is limited, this is currently the only significant legal sports betting in the United States outside of Nevada. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't encourage you to visit our brand new sports book at the $4 billion Baha Mar Resort in the Bahamas. And having walked up from the hotel in the wind today, I somehow think maybe I should be down in Nassau. A few years ago, we signed a deal with Monmouth Park Racetrack in New Jersey to operate a sports book should it become legal. And that was earlier on in the efforts to bring sports betting into New Jersey. And we've already built the sports book at Monmouth, and we're preparing to take bets as soon as we are legally permitted to do so. In fact, some of our folks are at Monmouth Park this week. As you know, the Supreme Court will rule in the New Jersey sports betting case in the coming months, and the court's ruling could have important implications for New York's gaming industry. New York is clearly ahead of the curve since it's already passed a statute regarding sports betting in casinos when it becomes legal under federal law. And as you think about the implementation of sports betting, we ask you to consider a few important matters, including the tax rate and betting on college sports. While sports betting will help bring many customers into New York's legal gaming market and generate revenue for the state, the reality is that sports betting is a low-margin business. In Nevada, the average hold, and that means the amount retained by the operator after paying winning customers, in recent years has been under 5%. That win percentage is much lower than other casino games. And meanwhile, the complexity and expense of running a sports betting operation is significant, which is why many casinos choose to outsource their sports books to William Hill. It's very, very difficult to do if you're a smaller operator or a single property operator, and they turn to someone such as William Hill to do it for them. And because of the low margins, it's imperative that the tax rate on sports betting be reasonable. By way of example, in Nevada, casinos pay a tax rate of up to 6.75% on sports betting revenue. New Jersey, we understand the tax rate for land-based sports betting is going to be 9.25%, which matches the gaming tax. Now, that's in addition to the quarter point of handle tax that we pay to the IRS as part of a federal excise tax. So handle is the gross amount wagered. A quarter point of that amount is payable to the IRS, and that quarter point of handle equates to an additional 5% tax on gross revenue. So when somebody talks about a 1% tax on handle, as my friend Mr. Spillane did earlier, it's important to understand that's 20% of revenue. This is a very substantial amount of money. Now, any state tax rate that's much higher than the Nevada or New Jersey rate makes it very difficult for legal bookmakers to price the product competitively with the black market operators who pay zero in taxes. And ultimately, these illegal operators, such as offshore websites, mob-connected bookies, and the like, they will be the true competition for legal sports betting when it comes to New York. Illegal bookmakers not only pay no taxes, but they also have no compliance costs. We must follow numerous state and federal regulations, and the cost to comply is substantial. I mean, we've got a whole compliance department, which I'll show you if you ever come to visit our office. Illegal bookmakers don't concern themselves with the Bank Secrecy Act obligations, suspicious activity reports, currency transaction reports, and the like. And with great respect to my friend Mr. Spillane, let's be clear on another point. Any taxes or fees on sports betting, no matter what they are called, should be payable to the state of New York for the benefit of all the citizens of New York, not to benefit wealthy private parties. A bill was recently introduced in another state that would have had the cleverly named integrity fee for the benefit of the sports leagues. And that's what you heard a little bit about earlier today. I don't know if they used the word integrity fee. It kind of got a little bit of a bad rap after the bill was introduced in Indiana. But that's just a euphemism for a cut of the action. Now, there will be plenty of financial benefits for the leagues, and I'll talk about them in a second. But there's no need to divert tax revenue from the citizens of New York to a privileged few. Now, the sports betting leagues have much to gain from legalized sports betting. In Europe and other parts of the world, sports teams collect millions of dollars in sponsorship revenue from the sports betting companies. Their logos are displayed on jerseys and on arena and stadium signage. A number of the English Premier teams have sports betting sponsors, and they wear their jersey. In addition, the leagues will profit from legalized sports betting by selling their data to the operators and from the increased fan engagement and the value of the broadcast rights. In Nevada, there is no mandatory requirement that you buy your data from somebody, right? The state doesn't dictate that. But nonetheless, operators buy data because it allows us to offer a better product and to ultimately, hopefully, have higher revenue. It's the free market at work. It's not something that's imposed by any type of legislation at all. And recently, it was just reported in the press that the NBA signed a $250 million deal with a sports data company that includes distribution of their data to sports betting operators. Now, another subject I'd like to briefly discuss is college sports. And this goes back to my central theme of being able to compete with the black market. In Nevada, we are permitted to take bets on our local college teams, such as UNLV or UNR, the University of Nevada at Las Vegas and at Reno. And indeed, William Hill is a proud sponsor of UNLV basketball and football. That's right, the William Hill logo appears courtside at Runnin' Rebels games. And I know it may be confusing because the NCAA is opposed to sports betting, but one of its teams is actually sponsored by a sports betting company. But be that as it may, there have not been any issues in that regard. Now, if legal bookmakers cannot offer betting on major college sports, it will be very difficult to migrate customers from the black market. You can't expect customers to bet in the legal market when their illegal bookie is the only one to offer betting on Syracuse basketball or the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden. Betting on major college sports is essential to our ability to compete with the black market and maximize revenue to the state. As we look forward to the Supreme Court's ruling in the next few months, we hope to one day work with you and your regulatory bodies to operate sports betting here in New York. And I'd appreciate the opportunity again to appear here today and welcome any questions that you may have.
You've been terrific, Mr. Asher. Let me ask you something. You know, we looked at online poker, we looked at fantasy sports, and but we got to know about the Wire Act and the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act. So these are my questions to you. There was a memo clarifying that the Wire Act did not impact the transmission of bets when we were in compliance with Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act, so long as they did not involve sporting events, okay? You were grandfathered in, so you didn't, the Wire Act, were you still have to comply?
Not quite, Senator. The Wire Act expressly applies to sports betting. The Wire Act does apply to sports betting. The memo you referenced said that basically it only applies to sports betting. It doesn't apply to poker or other forms of casino games.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. But I thought that the Wire Act would apply to the conduct of otherwise lawful sports betting online. Is that true?
It is, Senator. The Wire Act does apply to sports betting. In fact, I keep a copy of the statute on my phone because the issue comes up from time to time. 18 yes. United States Code 1084, I think. And basically, and I can get really into the detail on this, but you cannot transmit bets across state lines.
Across state lines, yeah.
Information can be shared across state lines if it's legal in both states.
Okay. Mobile sports betting allowed in New York. Should individuals have to register in person at a casino to create an account and then be able to bet on their phone? What do you think?
Yeah, fundamentally that's a public policy question, and you're the ones who are elected by the citizens.
Well, if you want to enhance revenues, that would be the way to go, don't you think?
The Nevada model is you go into a casino, you
yes.
sign up, then you can bet from anywhere within the state. The other model for mobile would be a remote sign up, where you can sign up anywhere within the state of New York and then bet anywhere within the state of New York.
Yeah, right.
And in fact, there's some suggestion that New Jersey may adopt that model. So fundamentally, it's just a public policy choice. You have competing points of view depending on who you're asking. But fundamentally, it's just a public policy question for you to decide.
But I'm asking you, from your experience in Nevada, would the mobile phone betting be something that would increase revenues in sports betting?
Oh, clearly mobile is desirable. I don't think there's any doubt about that. In this day and age, people are just doing so much on their mobile phones. So clear. And to give you some context around it, about 56% of our wagering activity is done on mobile.
Okay.
So about 44% is over the counter in a retail environment. Now the 56%, it's a lower margin business on mobile than it is in retail. So it doesn't, the revenue doesn't necessarily match up with that 56-44 that I just gave you. But clearly mobile is the fastest growing part of the business. Where you sign up for mobile is a different question.
Could you talk a little bit about sports events done via pari-mutuel betting and fixed odds betting?
The predominant form of sports betting not only in Nevada but across the world, is fixed odds sports betting.
Fixed odds, okay.
Yeah, which means that when you make the bet, you know what your payout's
Right.
going to be at the end, you know what the odds are, unlike pari-mutuel, where
Right.
the bets are basically pooled in the pari-mutuel horse racing industry here in the U.S.
Would that be true of all sports, or is one suited better for odds betting than another sport, or you just think you can say that statement for all sports?
The only thing that we offer pari-mutuel on is on horse racing.
Okay.
Everything else we do fixed odds bookmaking.
Now, are the odds the same from sports book to sports book?
No, they're not. The point spread on the game can fluctuate a little bit. Generally, they're close. Places in Nevada, at least last night, the Patriots are either 5 or 5.5 point favorite over the Eagles. So there's that half a point difference. It come down from, it was a little bit higher at some places earlier in the week. So there's a little bit of fluctuations to it. And then also the payoff. Generally, the payoffs are the odds offered on the major betting markets are roughly similar. But for instance, on things like Super Bowl futures, where you can bet all year on who's going to win the Super Bowl, different operators will have different prices that may reflect their particular risk on the event, and also a margin that they're building in as sort of a profit margin. Some people are more aggressive or more competitive than others. You pay more for a coffee at Starbucks than you might pay somewhere else.
McDonald's, sure. Do you find black market sports book is within the range of legitimate sports betting books in Nevada? In other words, if it's a payout of $20 difference, is the black market tied into that range?
So you don't have a very big black market actually in Nevada. At least it's not as apparent as it is in other places. And that's because of the proliferation and
regulation
of legal sports betting, and the ability for the legal operators to price the product competitively. I think generally we call it minus 110. You put up $110 to win 100. I mean, that is sort of the standard across. But I'll give you an example, Senator. When the parlay betting came to Delaware, one of the questions that we had back in 2009 when we were involved in setting it up was, what payoff do we offer? And it's offered by the lottery. The lottery is a monopoly provider. Do you want to offer a lower payout because of that fact? And we chose, ultimately the lottery chose, but our suggestion was to price it competitively with the Las Vegas market, so that people would not have an incentive to bet with their bookmaker. And so, as I said in my prepared remarks, the illegal bookies pay no taxes, and they don't have the compliance costs. And so the legal market has to be able to compete with that because it's well ingrained. People are used to calling up their bookie or betting with their bookie on the mobile app, and to get them to move into the legal world, you've got to give them a comparable product.
Would you know how much Nevada state government made from sports betting, either in 2017 or 2016? Would you have any estimates?
So if the final 2017 numbers aren't out yet, but let's say the total gross win was somewhere around, let's just use easy math, $250 million. Taking a $5 billion in handle number, 5% margin, $250 million in gross win. 6.75% of that gets paid to the Nevada Gaming Control Board. And then you have all the ancillary spending and all the ancillary revenue that goes along with it. To put it in New York context, while I was listening to some of the earlier testimony, and I think Senator Boyle had asked the question of, well, what's the likely market size of the New York market? And some published research that we've seen from some research groups who study the gaming industry, and this issue in particular, put the handle at somewhere between $4 and $19 billion, dependent upon the distribution for mobile. $4 billion maybe just retail only, then you add on mobile with sign up at the casino, and then the biggest number is with remote sign up. But if so, let's just, take $10 billion as a midpoint sort of range, twice the Nevada market, which doesn't seem unreasonable given the population of New York State. So at $10 billion, $5 billion, a $10 billion in handle, 5% of that in win is somewhere around $500 million in revenue. And then, obviously, the tax rate is for you to set. If you just, to keep the math simple, not suggesting this is a number, but, if you said 10% is the tax rate, that's $50 million. But that's, back of the envelope type of calculation, and doesn't consider, all the other ancillary sources of revenue that exist as well.
Okay. Last question for me. What would you say your industry best practices that we should consider for any state, including ours, if we want to set up a regulatory framework for sports betting, which you've experienced in Nevada? What would you say most successful best practices? I know what you talked about the warnings, the extra fees, the black market, you got to compete with them. But when you started and where you are now, what would you say are the best industry practices that we should consider if it's a go in New York, a regulatory framework? What would you say?
I think that's a great question, Senator. Clearly, the Nevada model is the obvious place to start because it's been in existence and refined repeatedly over the years. And, you have, it's a very heavily regulated industry in Nevada. The Gaming Control Board is our day-to-day regulator. They have something like 400 full-time staff, not only for sports betting, of course, but that's all casino gaming across the state. There are a number of things that we're required to report to the Gaming Control Board. Certainly any type of suspicious activity is reported to the Gaming Control Board, and to the extent that there have been issues over the years, some of the old college basketball issues came to light because of the Nevada sports betting operators reporting it to the Gaming Control Board. And the other key components, I think, of the Nevada regulatory structure are tax rate and allowing people the ability to compete. In terms of what we're allowed to offer wagers on, and there was some testimony about that earlier, basically the Nevada rule is any outcome that's determined on the field of play is acceptable for wagering without any further approval. Okay, so anything where the outcome is determined on the field of play or on the court, you can offer bets on. Now, the reliance is in part on the operators being very sensitive around what we offer bets on, because if there's something that's theoretically easy to impact, well, it's our money at stake, right? So, who's going to get the first foul in a basketball game, I think I heard somebody talk about. Yeah. Well, I'd be pretty nervous about putting that bet on because it's our money. Sure. And if we were going to offer that bet for some type of a reason, you'd keep it to a very, very small limit, which is how we control risk exposure. Anything where the outcome is not determined on the field of play, you need approval from the Gaming Control Board to offer it. An example of that is who's going to be the Super Bowl MVP. Okay, the outcome of that is not determined on the field of play, right? It's voted on by whoever votes on that. You have to get approval from the Gaming Control Board to offer that. In fact, it is approved for wagering, but other types of wagers like that. That's the distinction in Nevada as to how the bet types are issued or addressed.
Thank you, Senator Dalbo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Asher, thank you very much for the trip out here and a safe trip back. I think your input on this as we go down this road is going to be invaluable, so I truly appreciate your testimony today. And one of the issues that you brought up in your testimony is the tax rate. And I think that's going to be a major issue, a hurdle for us to work on as we go through the legislative process. That being said, because the tax rate also, again, according to your testimony, affects even the black market. So if you could allude about, allude a little bit more about the tax rate. In Nevada, does the tax rate differ from Nevada to Reno geographically? And what are some of the other considerations that maybe we should think of when discussing and working on the issue of the tax rate?
The tax rate applies across all non-restricted licensees in Nevada. So all sports betting, same tax rate. It's a tiered system, which caps out at 6.75. At some, starts out a little bit lower, and I don't have all the tiers, but most people, when they think of the Nevada tax rate, they think of 6.75. And that applies across the state. As it's a few points higher in New Jersey, and to some extent, I think it tracks and becomes relevant in the distribution model of how you're going to authorize sports betting and where people can sign up, because the cost structure for operators differs significantly as well, depending on how you're operating.
And just for a point of clarification, when you say a tier structure in Nevada, can you explain the tiers?
Yeah, Senator, I can get them for you afterwards. I don't remember precisely, but and I'm making these numbers up, but it might be 5% on the first 100,000 of revenue, then it's 5.5% on the next 500,000 of revenue, then 6%, and it caps out at 6.75.
Great. Again, thank you very much for your testimony. We look forward to working with you going forward.
Appreciate that, Senator.
Senator Marshall.
Yeah, I understand from your testimony that in Nevada, you sign up at a casino. But you said that 55% of all of the bets are put out online. How does the casino capture a percentage? Out of what amount of money do the casinos get back? I mean, you're online. There's other casinos. There's lots of casinos. How do they do that?
So, in order to sign up for mobile, you have to go into one of the casinos, and not just William Hill, but a number of our competitors offer a mobile sports betting product as well. So if you go to the Wynn or to MGM, you can sign up for your mobile account there. And then the revenue from that mobile wager would get tracked to a specific property, potentially. So if you sign up at the Wynn, that mobile revenue gets tracked to the Wynn, as an example, or to MGM. There are different and this goes to the earlier question of tax rates. There are some small local taxes on gaming revenue that can also apply to this, and that does vary amongst the different counties in Nevada. It's done on a county basis, and so there might be tax reasons why somebody would want to have mobile in a particular county versus another county. It's really not material in the overall scheme of things. It's the 6.75 that people are focused on. But in terms of mobile, you have to go into the casino to sign up, and then effectively that is where the player is signed up for his mobile account.
So everything that player does is tracked through that casino, and payment to the casino is by player after they've signed up in their particular casino, no matter where they bet, no matter where they live.
I understand the question, Senator. It depends. The answer is it depends. On if the property is running it themselves, they may track it one way or another. For instance, MGM probably has a dozen properties in Nevada. I'm not quite sure of the ins and outs of how they're allocating their mobile customer signups. We have, as I mentioned, 108 retail locations across the state. And how we treat mobile is often just a commercial agreement with the casino. And it'll be just a different contractual agreement with the property.
Senator Phillips.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Asher. So we just had testimony before you with these companies that do integrity. They make sure the tracking, they're monitoring illegal gambling. Does your firm do it in-house, or do you use an outside company?
So clearly, the ultimate obligation rests with us as the operator. We're the licensee, and so we're the ones subject to any sort of disciplinary action. We use our own proprietary betting system. We also do, in other parts of the world, have commercial agreements with various data providers. And there's data information sharing around integrity issues in other parts of the world as well. The general U.S. structure, the Nevada structure, is fundamentally the operator shares information with the Gaming Control Board. In effect, the Gaming Control Board acts as the clearinghouse. In the UK, there's something called ESSA. It's a European-based thing that is essentially a clearinghouse, but there's no requirement to work with a specific operator. There's not one RFP and somebody gets a monopoly to then be the provider and charge for the data, if you will. The market is allowed to do that, and the market's allowed to function with oversight from the Gaming Control Board.
Thank you.
So the suggestion that somehow there should be a mandated supplier is not the Nevada model.
Right. But the person doing the compliance of the gambling to make sure, one gentleman suggested that, as a game is going on, they're tracking this to make sure that there's not illegal betting going on. You do that in-house?
We would be clearly monitoring. Yeah, clearly you're monitoring it in house because again, it starts with the fact that it's our money at risk. Right. In addition to the fact that it's our gaming license that's on the line, and the Nevada model is it's a privileged license, and nothing gets in the way of that license. That is like you can't turn the lights on without it. And then there's also the sharing with the Gaming Control Board. And, there will be from time to time informal sharing amongst operators as well as part of the system. The UK model is this clearinghouse that's been set up so that sportsbook operator A calls in an issue, sportsbook operator B calls in an issue, and that's how things are tracked and come to light.
Assemblyman Prello?
Yes, Mr. Asher, just one quick question. After prizes are distributed, how is the dollar split up?
So in Nevada?
Yeah, in the bottom, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. So $100 wager translates into roughly $5 in revenue. The IRS basically gets 5% of that because they get a quarter point of the handle. So they get 5% of that $5, and then 6.75% of the $5 would go to the state of Nevada, to the Gaming Control Board. So you have effectively, call it 11.75% goes to the federal and state government, and then the rest goes into expenses, operating expenses. And then ultimately, the bottom line is profit.
So you say operating expenses, it would go to you, the operator, and then from that, you pay your employees and pay your rent and your light bill and your personal taxes and everything.
Correct. You'd pay the casino. In our model, the casinos, and then of course all the employees, and then the other hard costs that have to the extent that we subscribe to services for information, all ordinary types of expenses.
So you pay the casinos a fee for renting space, basically, or
effectively, yes.
Okay.
Effectively, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you so much, Mr. Ashton, and you have a safe trip going back. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
We really appreciate your remarks.
Thank you.
The next witness will be Scott Freeman, who's President, General Manager of Tioga Downs Casino.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you. Chairman, Senators, Assemblyman, thank you so much for affording me some time here today. Tioga Downs, of course, is a proponent to having the sports betting component be able to be housed physically within the 4 commercial gaming casinos. We believe that it would be an addition for us to meet the gap of the forecasted versus actual revenue deficiencies that we've seen. Tioga Downs also respectfully requests that the online component be approved and that it specifically be to the 4 casinos where the hubs are. The ability to add sports betting to Tioga Downs, full-service casino resort, and to our amenity package is certainly a natural progression as we offer all the other gaming components. We've already seen and heard that in the news that PA is ready to enact the land-based sports betting, and in October, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf signed a sweeping gaming expansion bill that was immediately passed by their Senate. Our close proximity to Pennsylvania requires that we allow sports betting, including the online component, in order to remain competitive. It would be also in our best interest to be able to move quickly on that. As we all know, in a competitive business market, equal timing or better timing is always positive to garner customer loyalties. In addition of the sports betting, we believe would bolster our other gaming mediums, such as horse racing, slots, poker, and the table games. Sports betting appeals to the younger demographic. The casino industry, of course, faces the challenge of attracting the millennials, and the quick online betting component is a stimulating factor of on the sports betting wagering. We believe that will attract more people to either the facility and to ultimately on the online as well. Additionally, we request that when hopefully this is passed, that there would be a significant attention paid to the so-called illegal sites from a competitive standpoint. And then as we speak today, we are hopefully looking at a positive note here that we are preparing plans to already locate our betting parlor within our existing casino.
Mr. Freeman, just quickly,
Sure.
Do you think you need any changes or updates to the existing statute to go forward with sports betting at your casino? Would you need anything else other than what we've done?
No, I really don't. And right now, we work very closely with the Gaming Commission, and I just don't see that. As how this rolls out, our relationship there is very good in all of our regulatory areas, so how it rolls out, we'll make it work.
Yeah. Senator Marshall?
Thank you. Isn't it true, although the percentages aren't where they were projected to be, isn't it true, though, that you're really not completely rolled out yet, and the forecast of where you will be in a year or two could be very different than where you are today?
Fair question. We're rolled out now, most recently in December. So what we saw last year, we have to grow on that. We haven't gotten our baseline yet because of that growth. So no, we are in a growth period, so there is no baseline yet at this point.
So you do have an opportunity, though, you believe, that as people know you're there and become more established, that may change.
Oh, absolutely should change, and especially with the additional amenities that were just recently opened.
And isn't it true that for those of us who have racinos in their areas, that they have lost a considerable amount of revenue since the casinos have been established?
Well, as you well know, we own a racino as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure that I'm the right person to ask with that, because there's tribal casinos around as well. There's a lot of quote-unquote noise in the industry at this point in time.
Well, I think the industry is very uncertain what the with the addition of the casinos, I at least know from my own knowledge of my casino in Saratoga, that there has been monies that have been lost, and that the governor is now projecting in the upcoming budget that the way they are paying and how much they're going to be able to keep is now volatile. Of course, as I sit here and look at what's happening, I thank you for your testimony, but I also think that there are other racinos in racetracks that are also trying to compete and also trying to continue to stay alive, that have been in our state, the track, the NYS, for 150 years and trying to make life work for themselves as well. So I just, of course, think that not only should casinos be able to participate and collect on on this possibility, but I also think it should be expanded.
Any other questions? Okay, give our regards to Mr. Corral.
Sure will.
And I appreciate you coming today, Mr.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Michael Kane, the Executive Director of the New York Gaming Association. And after Mr. Kane, we have one other speaker, James Manny will be next, and then we'll be finished.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
See you again, Michael. How's the new job going, okay?
I've been there a week.
That's what I say. So far, so good.
Well, it's okay. I was a director for 6.5 years, so it's like coming home again. So, but I appreciate the comments, Senator. I represent the New York Gaming Association, which is made up of the video gaming licensees here in New York State, as well as some new members. One is Suffolk OTB, which has joined us with Jake's 58, and Rivers Resort and Casino, which has also joined us, and Empire Resorts will be joining us shortly after their opening on February 8th. Chairman Bonacic and members of the committee. The New York Gaming Association, NYGA, very much appreciates the opportunity to speak before you regarding the potential of sports betting in New York State. On behalf of the members of our association, as well as the newly authorized casinos. The Supreme Court of the United States will soon render a decision regarding sport betting outside the state of Nevada. Should that decision favor the state of New Jersey, the existing statute will allow, under the regulatory guidance of the New York State Gaming Commission, commercial casino licensees to accept wagers on professional sports and pay a 10% tax on the revenues generated from that activity. Thusly, a new and exciting entertainment opportunity will be presented to New Yorkers. But due to the statutory requirement that all individuals place his or her wager in person at a commercial casino, the availability of this opportunity, and with it the ability to generate revenue for New York State, will be severely limited. Therefore, the challenge is twofold: where and how to make this activity accessible to all New Yorkers. The existing video gaming licensees and the new casino licensees have been advocates for responsible gaming, as well as willing partners and revenue generators for New York State and local municipalities since their inception. The secure and regulated facilities required to conduct professional sports betting exist across the state at locations from those wagering on professional sporting events while also engaging. I just skipped a sentence, I apologize. The secure and regulated facilities required to conduct professional sports betting exist across the state at locations operated by the video gaming facilities and commercial casinos. Video gaming licensees presently provide $7.5 billion for education to the state and the regional municipalities. These revenue streams would be supplemented by increased traffic at the brick and mortar locations from those wagering on professional sporting events, while also engaging in cross-play of existing product. Responsibility, availability, performance, and enhanced revenue streams make the video gaming licensees, in addition to commercial casinos, the obvious best choice to provide the necessary expanded availability for professional sports wagering to all New Yorkers and to curb the rampant illegal gaming marketplace. However, In order to fully capitalize on the positive federal ruling and to protect regional competition, we cannot stop there. Additionally, in order to make availability to all New Yorkers, increased pool sizes to generate necessary volume required to run an effective sports betting business, as well as to increase state revenue, the members of NYGA suggest the adoption of legislation allowing, and Mr. Asher already touched on this, the use of mobile wagering applications be added as permissible ways to place a wager. Now, requiring the player to enroll at a licensed brick-and-mortar location and having the application server located at that brick-and-mortar facility would retain the spirit of the existing statute while providing an enhanced level of likely participation. This is a necessary step to not only future-proof our market, but also ensure the economics of sports betting remain steady for the benefit of both the operator and the state. Now, how can this be undertaken by the legislature and the governor? It is expressed that any move to expand the availability of sports wagering to all New Yorkers will likely require consecutive legislative approvals followed by a constitutional referendum. The members of NYGA do not necessarily agree with this determination. At present, and I say at present, it has been determined that daily fantasy sports, DFS, play is a game of skill. We submit that the criteria for determining what actions to take in DFS play and to place a wager on professional sporting events are the same and require the same review and study before taking action. The only difference is in DFS, one selects players to form a make-believe team. In sports wagering, one selects a group of players that make up an existing real team. The variables and parameters used to select a play are the same in both activities. One considers matchups, both individual and group, injuries, past history, scheduling and player fatigue, recent records and performance, is somebody hot or cold, and outside influences among the considerations used before playing. If, in fact, this determination of the similarity between daily fantasy sports play and professional sports wagering is shown to be valid, one can assume that legislative action to expand the availability of professional sports wagering to New Yorkers and shut down the illegal gaming market would be all that is required. To summarize, the members of the New York Gaming Association strongly suggest, should New Jersey be successful in court, that the expanded availability of professional sports wagering is desirable, that the best option to do so is at the video gaming licensee facilities and commercial casinos, as well as through mobile applications, and that simple legislative action may be all that is required to accomplish this. Again, the members of the New York Gaming Association, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today.
Mr. Kane, I'll just be real brief. Naturally, you would like to see sports betting at all the racinos. That goes without saying. And you're suggesting that a constitutional amendment would not be needed to do this at the racinos. Is that your opinion today?
So long as it's continued to be determined that daily fantasy sports play is a game of skill. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Kane. Do you have any questions? Does anybody else have any questions? No. Okay.
Questions?
Oh, yes. Senator Sanders.
I'm sorry. The difference between game of skill, game of chance.
Well, game of skill is legal without a constitutional amendment. Game of chance, the Constitution would have to be amended.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, folks.
I guess I do have a question.
Senator Phillips.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
I know it's getting late.
I apologize, Chairman.
Go ahead. You
I kind of jumped out of my chair there for a second. But we were just talking amongst ourselves. So there's a lot of different types of betting. So NYRA was here this morning. Would you believe a constitutional amendment would need to occur in order to include NYRA in that? No. So as long as, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Lawyers say differently. Thank you, Mr. Kane. Our last speaker today, and we thank James Manny for his patience. He's the Executive Director of the New York Council on Problem Gambling.
That's all right. They're going to make decisions on that. I don't think they agree with what he said. Of course, I would too. We want to give the green light. I agree, right? I agree. This thing compulsive gambling,
You have to stay. You should stay. This is the anchor leg. This is like the relay race. The bus is always run the end, right?
It's an event. If I don't, my apologies.
Bolt ran the end. He was the anchor of that, right? Thank you very much.
You're on.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Maney, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York Council on Problem Gambling. We are very, very thrilled to be here today. I represent the 19 million New Yorkers, that may or may not have difficulties as a result of the expansion of gambling. So let me just say that one more time. We advocate for the folks that are having difficulties currently, and for us to just be reminded of those that may have difficulties as a result of this. Now, the New York Council on Problem Gambling, we do not take a stand for or against gambling whatsoever. But what we want to do is make sure that we raise the awareness of problem gambling and that we have services for everybody that needs it. Now, the big crisis that's going on right now in the addiction field is the opioid crisis. And I know every one of us in this room, if we could have done this over, we would have done so much more prevention. We're doing education now for everybody, aren't we? If we could have done that before, I know we would have done it. If we could have done different things on how we dealt with this, I know we all would have done it. So I ask us, as we deal with this, make sure we, in 10, 20 years from now, we don't have to suffer the same exact thing. And I'm not saying we're going to. Mr. Cunningham talked about the need for prevention, to prevent match fixing, to prevent everything. And that's what we ask for too. We need to prevent problem and pathological gambling. We need to do all that we can to prevent it so we don't have something down the road. As we take a look at new technology, I mean, this is a different animal. We talk about availability and opportunity. The more available something is, the more opportunity is, the more people are going to do it. The more people that are going to do something that is a vice or an addiction, the more that are going to have difficulties for it. We know that. So we have to make sure that we're doing enough to prevent this, to treat it, to educate us. We have to do all the things that we're doing about the opiate crisis now about this situation. Those is what we have to do. We need to have dedicated funding, just like we did for the casinos. For the first time ever, I applaud that there was dedicated funding for problem gambling. We didn't do it for daily fantasy sports, but we need to do it for this. We need to make sure that our 19 million New Yorkers are educated about this. Educated about how fast this is going to be, how quick it's going to be, and that availability and that opportunity is what creates more people to do it. I was reading an article from Verizon the other day, and they're talking about that they believe there's 3 times more amount of people are going to do sports betting than currently do it in the black market. That's a lot of new people. That's a lot of new people. I have an 18, will be 19 in a few days, year-old boy in college. They can't wait for legal sports betting. They cannot wait. We interviewed someone recently. We did a talk up in Queensbury High School. And the 17-year-old boys were talking about how exciting it is if this becomes available. So all I'm saying is we got to educate people to the dangers. We have to educate people about what's going on. We know the advertisement that is going to be placed on this is going to be huge. We have to make sure there's counter-advertising just to share the warning signs and the dangers. Our families need to know what's going on, what it looks like. And we have to put that up place first. Because as we always see, the safeguards slowly and surely get eroded away. In Australia, when the man was talking about the 33% of the folks that are in treatment services in Australia are for sports gamblers. That's a new phenomenon since they put that in there. Same thing about the UK. The UK are having huge difficulties as a result of sports betting. And they're starting to put in a lot of this prevention stuff that needs to be done, the education pieces, things that need to be done so we prevent people from having the difficulties. And that's all I ask for us, that we need to do that. And we need to put it up front and make it an important issue for us, because we don't want to deal with it later on in the past. So once again, in just leaving you, I advocate for those families, our friends, our loved ones that will be introduced to a new form of expansion of gambling, that we make sure we put the safeguards in place, that there is prevention, education, treatment, research, and the training necessary for folks to be aware of what's going on. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you for your passionate testimony. With the slot machines, with the casinos, there's $500 a machine that goes for gambling addiction. There are self-exclusion programs where people volunteer to say, don't let me gamble here. I don't want to gamble here because I know I can't handle it. I'm told, and I can't speak with much authority on this, but the casinos tell me that they do track problem gamblers, and they will cut them off if they think they shouldn't be gambling anymore. Now, that goes against, wanting to make a profit at a casino. And as you were talking about prevention, I'm thinking of all the ads on smoking that we see on TV all the time to prevent, cancer or respiratory illness. And what you're saying, get out front on this stuff.
Correct.
Educate early.
Correct.
And do it often.
It sounds great. Yes.
I understand. But, Americans make choices, and we try to protect them against themselves, but they eventually have the ultimate choice. But I respect everything you've said, because there's not a word that you said that wasn't true.
Yes, and we've seen the cigarette rates go down as a result of the ads.
I understand.
And we see those things that work. Counter-advertising works. So if we're really in it to protect and really to help our fellow New Yorkers, we need to put those things in place.
Oh, I agree. Okay. Anybody have any questions?
If I may,
Senator Dalbo and Senator Sanders.
I just want to echo what the chairman said. We appreciate your efforts and your time here today, Ms. Manning. In your testimony, you gave not only a request for the funding, but you also gave other recommendations and links to certain websites we can go for more information. So I want to say thank you very much for including that in your testimony and being here to raise awareness of a very important issue. So thank you.
Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, let me congratulate both chairs on a great hearing. And now to the question, let me go a step further and say I share Mr. Manny's concerns, as everyone up here apparently does. It might be interesting if we were to have some, if we're going to do this by mobile phone and other things, might be good to have an ad come up on those mobile phones also, sharing
not a bad idea.
Any type of help that people can get and things of that nature. We should continue this conversation, sir. Thank you very much to the entire panel.
Okay. All right, I want to thank all the witnesses that came today, although some of them are on a plane and some of them are in a car, they're all gone, to take the effort to share your expertise and wisdom. I just want to remind everyone again that the testimony today will be put on the Senate website, everything. But if anyone wishes to submit written testimony, it will be accepted until Friday, February 2nd. The hearing is now adjourned. It is now 20 to 2. And I thank all my colleagues here for coming. Okay? Okay, my friend Joe. Yeah, thank you for coming.
you.